Hi, welcome to the latest of these video talks about Irish ancestors, the site and the people. Today I'm going to be talking about how to start your family history. So it'll be a bit general, but as usual, I'm going to start from the jumping off point on the website itself. So let's go there now. Right, here we are at the website. As usual, the jumping off point is here. Okay, in the free browse section. This is part of the book Tracing Our Irish Ancestors, the latest edition from 2019. And what do I need to know before I start? So starting Irish research. This is the everything I'm going to be saying, more or less. Maybe some of the more libelous things aren't written down here, but the everything else is here. The first point to be made when you start out is that you have to talk to your family. It makes no sense to spend hours grinding through microfilm images to find a parish record if your great aunt Agatha knows all of this stuff already. And one of the things about doing that, it fleshes out the family. You get to find out more about the family by talking to them than you will in the records. The records can be dry. There can be just facts and dates and names. You'll get stories from your family. In most families as well, there tends to be one or two people, a second cousin maybe, or a third cousin out there, who has specialized in keeping track of everybody and is only too delighted to pass the information on. So if you can identify that family, you're laughing, you're away in a hack. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing, specifically about Irish ancestors, is you should place no reliance whatsoever on the spellings of surnames or even on reported dates. You have to put yourself back in the mindset of the people you're going to be researching. Most of them never saw their surname written down, even if they were literate, which the majority weren't, but they never saw their surname written down. So why should they care how it was spelt? Okay, there you'll find on the website, you'll find lists and reams of surname variations that occur in different records for the same surname. So approach it with a mind as open as you possibly can. Even at this stage, after 30 years of doing this stuff, I'm still coming across spelling variations that just leave me with my jaw hitting the floor. So you have to be as broad-minded as possible about that. Also, reported dates. Most people tend to underreport their age, not because they're full of vanity, because they want you to think they're younger than they are. It's simply because most people, until well into the 20th century, didn't celebrate birthdays. They didn't have birth certificates. They never saw their birth certificate. They didn't know their exact date of birth. And if you ask somebody over the age of 30 what age they are, they're going to look into their heart and they're going to say, well, I think I'm 22, am I? So, I, for example, I'm in my mid-30s now, I think, mentally speaking. So just be careful of that. Reported dates are usually later than they should be. Okay, you'll find them, most people, earlier than that. So that's one thing. When you're talking to people, when you're looking at the records, write everything down. You never know what's going to end up being relevant. That peculiar piece of information from Aunt Agatha about the second cousin who went to Argentina, that might turn out to be the one thing that unlocks the whole family history. So again, accuracy isn't the most important thing at this stage. Just collect the information. One of the pitfalls, again, of particularly of Irish research, is people who try to connect themselves to existing families. There's a particular reason for that in Ireland. Much more than anywhere else in Western Europe, genealogy was an extraordinary part of Gaelic culture. The genealogists were a lot more respected than they are now, I can tell you. Genealogies were how you demonstrated your entitlement to authority, who your people were, your entitlement to own things. Ownership tended to run in extended families, not in, father to son, the single line that we have now. So genealogies were extremely important, and there's loads of them out there, and they all end just before the horizon of the records that we have now. So the 16th, the 17th century, but the temptation just to jump those few generations and connect yourself to one of those can be really strong. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, the surname Kelly obviously is a very widespread name. If we go into the family histories here and go down to John O'Donovan, John O'Donovan was probably the most famous antiquarian, Irish antiquarian of the 19th century. He wrote a book called The Tribes and Customs of Hymeni, commonly called O'Kelly's country. This is now usually referred to as Emania, and it's an area in East Galway, southwest Roscommon, basically where most of my people come from. He published all sorts of manuscript in genealogies that hadn't appeared in print before. Let me show you. Okay, this is a link to an online version of the book at o'kelly.net, and let me just show you what this looks like. This is the composite pedigree that he's put together, and you can see it goes from the year 916. There's one. There's 1268, Conor Moore O'Kelly. You can see Charles Kelly of Aughran lived around 1690. Dennis Kelly of Aughran died without issue 1740. If you're a Kelly and you come from this part of the country, the temptation to try and shoehorn your family into something like this is pretty much overwhelming. And the best advice I can give you is resist the temptation. Okay, it is these are fascinating things, but they're almost all out of reach. Okay, there are sometimes it has happened. I have found one or two occasions where I've managed to connect somebody to a pedigree like this. The McDermotts of Coolavin in North Roscommon. I found a family in Canada who could identify a marriage on the pedigree, a pedigree like this. It was a manuscript pedigree, and it gave them a family back to the 13th century. So, but that's winning the genealogical jackpot, and the odds are just as high against doing it with genealogy as with doing the lottery. Okay, one thing as well, you will need help. Okay, the whole point of johngrenham.com is to provide help to people who are researching their Irish ancestors, but it's not the only one. There are lots of sites out there that will give you advice, that will tell you how to interpret records, give you listings of records, and so on and so forth. But you will need help. One of the most annoying features of Irish research is just how fragmented the records are. A lot of it has to do with the burning of the Public Record Office in 1922, but whatever the cause, the fact is that there are bits and pieces of records that may be relevant to you, but how do you know they exist? You're going to need a listing to tell you, so get help. There are advisory services in the National Library of Ireland and the National Archives of Ireland. During COVID, the National Archives are doing an email version of the service, so they will give you personalised advice on your family history. Okay, what are you going to find? Again, this is one of the most common questions that people ask. How far back can you go? Okay, the first thing to say is that every family is different. One of the joys of genealogy is that the circumstances of each family are unique. Okay, so there's no one answer. In general terms, for the majority of the population, those descended from Catholic tenant farmers or labourers in the 19th century, the furthest back you can go is generally the start of the parish registers, the Catholic parish registers. So that would be, and that varies again greatly. In places like Donegal, a lot of the registers don't begin until the 1840s, 1850s, or even later. So that's an unfortunate fact. In other parts of the country, in the east, the areas that were more settled, more less poor, to put it bluntly, some of the records can start in the 1780s, 1790s, and again, that's about as far back as you'll be able to go. In other cases, there are bits and pieces of records that can take you a little further back, but for the majority of people, as I say, those descended from small Catholic tenant farmers or landless labourers, that's the limit. And it's an unfortunate fact. One of the things that happens in Irish research is that people hit that limit, and they, at that point, they're addicted and they can't give up. So they end up going sideways into local history, examining families of the same surname, other families in the same area, the interconnections, the local history, the customs, the language. So it's in most countries, genealogy has a very hazy border with local history. In Ireland, the border is pretty much non-existent. So you'll end up in local history very easily. And of course, as soon as I generalize about that, there are some cases where you can take families back, as I said, to the 13th century. Rare, but occasionally possible. And live in hope. That's all I can say. And be lucky, the most important element of Irish research. Thanks for listening. Good hunting.